All right, guys, so let's talk about how to fix metabolic syndrome. And we talked in the previous video how metabolic syndrome is actually the underlying cause of all the comorbidities that actually lead to the worst results with the virus. Because the statistics are clear, 94% of the deaths are in people that have 2.6 or more comorbidities like cancer and heart disease and liver disease and PCOS and hypertension, diabetes, all those things. Those are the comorbidities that go along with the high death rate. And now we know it's probably more like 4 comorbidities instead of 2.6, but it's a lot. So really, that's the reason the sickest people get the sickest when it comes to the virus. So how do we fix metabolic syndrome? Well, first of all, metabolic syndrome, just as a review, is a combination of visceral fat or visceral obesity, which is fat around your midsection, around your organs, butt, hips, and thighs, high hypertension, insulin resistance, high triglycerides, and low HDL, which is your healthy cholesterol. And we'll talk about in a future video how that's actually a myth. But it's those 5 things: obesity, insulin resistance, hypertension, low HDL, and high triglycerides. Well, what is the cause of metabolic syndrome? Because high blood pressure and visceral obesity and lipid numbers that are out of balance are really just a symptom. So what causes those symptoms? And it's 3 things. Remember, the causes of metabolic syndrome are overconsumption of carbohydrates and sugar, you have a sedentary lifestyle, and you have too many toxins in your life. So we're gonna address those. The first one I want to talk about is the overconsumption of carbohydrates and sugar. And that's a big one because carbs, the mnemonic we use is turning off your GPS. And GPS, because if you're eating foods out of the GPS category, then your GPS is set for cancer and heart disease and high triglycerides and high blood pressure, all those other chronic diseases defined by metabolic syndrome. So your GPS is as follows: grains, processed food, and processed dairy would be included in that, and then also sugars. So GP&S is grains, processed dairy or processed food, and then sugar. So grains is the first one, and that's really the umbrella term for foods that turn quickly into sugar. And we know grains is bread, pasta, cereal, crackers, chips, pretzels, cookies, bagels, muffins, pastries, and oatmeal. Yes, oatmeal and corn. I know, sorry. Corn is a grain, but it's those things. So bread, pasta, cereal, crackers, chips, pretzels, cookies, bagels, muffins, pastries, oatmeal, and corn. So those are your grains. Those are foods that when you consume them, they turn very, very quickly into sugar. You see, we have an enzyme in our saliva called amylase, which is designed to break down carbohydrates. So most of those carbs, like wheat bread, whole wheat bread, even white bread, all those carbs, pasta, cereal, when you eat those, they turn very quickly into mush, and that mush is sugar. So the amylase in your saliva turns that carbohydrate into simple sugar really before it actually gets even into the stomach. So those foods are essentially the same as sugar. And the problem is that constitutes probably 80% of the typical American diet. So I'm going to say this is very simple, but it's not easy. So eliminating or reducing or watching your consumption of carbs and sugars, it's a lot harder than it sounds. So that's turning off the grains. And now we talk about grains, we're not talking about like buckwheat and amaranth and couscous and quinoa and wild rice. Those are typically fine. So we're talking about the simple starchy carbohydrates like bread, pasta, cereal, crackers, chips, pretzels, cookies, bagels, muffins, pastries, oatmeal, and corn. So that's the G. The P stands for processed. And I don't have to tell you that, processed food is bad for you, but primarily processed dairy. Because in the processed foods, we get, a lot of denatured trans fats, your linoleic acids, all your bad fats that are found in your crackers and your chips and your cookies. But then the processed dairy is another big one. And that's your milks, your yogurt, and most cheese, and your ice cream. I know this is not good news, and I'm sorry, but the truth is not always easy to hear. So processed dairy. And if you think about it too, we're the only animals that drink or consume dairy after they're weaned from their mother. So we're the only animals that continue to drink milk after infancy. Bunny rabbits don't do it. Dogs don't do it. Kitty cats do it, I guess, if you give them a bowl of milk, but they're not designed to keep drinking milk. Even cows don't drink milk after infancy, but they say, well, how do I get my calcium, right? Well, where do cows get their calcium? Grass. They're not chasing each other around the field trying to nurse. They literally get it from vegetation, which is where we get our calcium as well. And other people say, well, if you drink enough milk, you won't get enough vitamin D. Well, you need over 100 glasses of milk every single day to get your minimal vitamin D requirement. And I don't know anybody drinking that much milk, and I certainly wouldn't recommend that. Milk is essentially liquefied ice cream. That's why kids love it, because it's loaded with sugar, and it tastes like liquefied ice cream. That's why we love it. But we were raised on it, right? And we don't even drink the milk of our own species. So like, we're not even drinking like mother's milk. We're drinking, milk from an animal that's 500 pounds, right? So the proteins are bigger. It's designed to put hundreds of pounds on a calf, within, a matter of months. Whereas baby's milk or mom's milk is supposed to put, 10 pounds on a baby in the course of a year. So milk does not do a body good. We got to get away from milk. Whole raw milk is fine. Almond milk, coconut milk, those are all good choices as long as they're not loaded with sugar. But we've got to get away from the milk. And then the S, so the G is the grains, the P is the processed food and the processed dairy, and then the S is sugar. Yeah, sorry to say that. It's not sweet potatoes. Sugar, right? So we're supposed to avoid sugar, and that comes in many varieties, but those are the three foods that drive up inflammation. They create a lot of cellular congestion, and that leads to metabolic syndrome. And then when you start getting metabolic syndrome, you get things like visceral obesity, like fat around your midsection, hips, butt, and thighs, your high cholesterol, your insulin resistance, your low HDL, and your high LDL. So, and then we know we have those over time. That's when we get things like heart disease and diabetes and cancer and liver dysfunction and PCOS and the diseases of chronic metabolic syndrome. And then if you have those, then you've got a much higher rate of dying from the virus. It's just that simple. So we have to start addressing and turning off our GPS, get to the underlying root of the overconsumption of carbohydrates and sugar. And in the next video, we're going to talk about toxins, and we're also going to talk about sedentary lifestyle. So those are the causes of metabolic syndrome. If you got any questions, we'd love to be a resource. Please reach out, send text, share this, post it on your own social media, because this is not the message people are talking about. It's all masks and vaccines and hand sanitizer and distancing. Nobody's talking about the underlying cause of why the sickest people get so sick. So remember, it's simple, but it's not easy, and we're here to help. So stay tuned for the next video. Have a great day. God bless.